Hello, this is John Paul MacDuffie recording my presentation for the Gerpisa conference. Let me share my screen. I'm presenting on the industrial relations perspective on lean systems workers and unions. Like other presentations in this session and the other related session, this is a chapter that I wrote for the International Handbook of Lean Production, edited by Tom and Lapina. And my goals in this chapter were to highlight what's distinctive about an industrial relations perspective on lean systems, workers, and unions, to revisit the Kochan, Katz, and McKersie transformation of industrial relations framework as extended by Adam Seth Litwin of Cornell, to dig deeper into the relationship among the strategy, function, and workplace dimensions. I also look deep into the history of lean production to talk about two different approaches that have evolved over time. A balanced approach from Toyota and articulated increasingly fully as part of their Toyota Way communications starting in 2001. A balanced system where the technical and human pillars are equally important versus a technical only orientation that just focuses on the operation tools and approaches of lean without paying attention to the human dimension. I also pay attention here to some of the primary areas in which unions tend to have problems with or have conflicts with lean production, and emphasize job control approaches to unionism versus more enterprise level approaches to labor relations. And I pull all that together looking mostly at auto industry examples. So briefly, what's distinctive about the industrial relations perspective? It sees the employment relationship as inherently mixed motive. So the interests of workers and managers are sometimes aligned, sometimes opposed. And there's no view that conflict is somehow a sign of something negative or unusual. In fact, conflict is to be expected as a function of the employment relationship where the interests of workers and managers are opposed. The industrial relations perspective foregrounds the importance of institutions at various levels, national, regional, local, particularly related to labor markets, institutions of skill development, and the like. It takes an interactionist point of view on industrial relation processes. In other words, looking at the sequence of management and union actions and co-actions and how that creates a dynamic that shapes outcomes. And a perspective that sees equilibria in labor management relations as being relatively common, as being resistant to change due to inertia and self-perpetuating cycles of trust or mistrust. So the book by Tom Kochan, Harry Katz, and Bob McKersie, sometimes called KKM, published in the early 1980s, was a landmark in the modern history of industrial relations, and they argued strongly for looking beyond simply functional level industrial relations to include a strategic and workplace level. And you can see on the slide on the sides some examples of what the functional level is, the strategic level, and the workplace level. And I think for industrial relations scholars, the point of the deep exploration of the functional dimension or level was where collective bargaining took place. That was where contracts were written and contract rules were enforced and grievance procedures were set up, and as well as where the primary policies of the firm affecting pay and benefits, hiring, career paths, training and skills, et cetera, were set. So there was plenty to study at the functional level, but Katz and McKersie said you can't really understand what's going on at the functional level without understanding changes at the strategic level, which includes the competitive forces affecting the firm and the firm's positioning and product strategy, the type of product markets that the firm competes in, whether they're domestic only or global, the intensity of the international competition, whether the competition is on wages or other things, labor costs or other things, Also, in this context, the firm's commitment to lean production as the core of its operations strategy, and whether that commitment is broad enough to include the balanced two pillars perspective or just really a technical commitment. Some of the overarching goals for labor management relations certainly matter as well, where management is intent on a long-term anti-union campaign, then the short-term fluctuations in any given setting are less important than the decisions driving towards that other goal, or conversely, aiming to improve the overall state of labor management relations. And the workplace level is more the day-to-day level where workers interact with each other and with supervisors, where jobs are designed, where the flow of work affects and the interdependence and other aspects of the work organization affects workers' daily experience of work. This is where you find work structures such as teams, if they exist. And as I said, where the critical relationships both with the management and hierarchy and among coworkers take place. So what Adam Seth Litwin did in 2015 was revisit these three levels and say it's important to pay attention to alignment across these levels. And he talked about the vertical alignment between the strategic level and the workplace level, the vertical alignment between the strategic level and the functional level, and then the horizontal alignment between the workplace level and the functional level. And I felt that this provided a valuable lens on looking at what happened with the implementation of lean production in different kinds of settings where there were different approaches to unionism, or of course non-union settings as well. The balanced lean was arguably always the core of the Toyota production system, but Toyota was rather slow to articulate many aspects of Toyota production system. And what they wrote about first were the more technical aspects. So that's how the world first learned about TPS. But as they increasingly globalized in the 1990s, they recognized the importance of having clearer communication, clear documentation, clear statements of their principles and their values for Toyota production system, and also they wanted to signal their intention to apply the Toyota Way as a broader management philosophy to the entire firm, not just to manufacturing, also to supply chains, to product development, to distribution and sales, and even within the functions. So, eventually there was a Toyota Way of finance and accounting, a Toyota Way of sales and marketing, Toyota Way of HR, et cetera. And so the upper left image is from the first Toyota document that talked about these things in 2001. That's a time when Toyota was doing a executive education program with Wharton, and I was the academic director. So I saw a lot of the drafts of this Toyota Way 2001 document that were being developed. The most common representation of the Toyota intention to have an equal balance between respect for people and continuous improvement is what you see in the middle. I think I first saw this as part of Toyota training in Europe, but it's been picked up by lots of other people, other companies, consultants, and the like. But notice there's another kind of similar image that you can easily find out there, which is entirely focused on the technical and operations aspects of Toyota production system, and really has almost nothing to do with anything about the way people are managed or the way people should be managed, other than this one mention of separating human and machine work. So for a whole variety of reasons, the balanced lean that Toyota pioneered and really sticks very closely to ends up being relatively rare, and technical only lean is much more common. Just to probe a little bit the relationship between lean systems and traditional union and union management and labor relations approaches, let me just highlight a couple things. Job control unionism, particularly evident in the United States because it became the focus of the United Auto Workers, to some degree also in the UK. It's a bit less true in countries like Germany that have national level agreements for collective bargaining, and then have works councils that might cover some of the more local issues related to jobs. But in any case, under job control unionism, wages are tied to jobs, not workers. Seniority governs movement across jobs. You have a sort of a sense of a contractually established worker's right to a job and certain rights to, if there are layoffs or other kinds of opportunities, that the movement is based on seniority. In contrast, systems detach wages from jobs. They reduce job classes. They train for multi-skilling and job rotation. And really their intention is to have a lot more flexibility and fluidity in the way in which labor is matched to jobs. That's partly because jobs and the content of any given job may be changed fairly frequently, both as new products are introduced, but also as Kaizen or continuous improvement activities actually improve efficiency or change the quality procedures or change the safety procedures of the given job. Another thing that's very true is that managers in lean systems appeal directly to workers to get them to both be engaged in the cognitive effort of Kaizen and contributing their knowledge to improving productivity and quality, also to align workers' interests with the competitive success of the plant, of the factory, of the company more broadly. And where there is a union, they also seek to draw the local union into identifying with those competitiveness goals. So each of these tendencies of lean systems raise some conflicts or tensions with traditional functions of unionism. Part of why job control unionism has all those rules embedded in the contract is to limit management's discretion. Making changes that would make jobs more intense or in other ways alter how they're done without having to consult with workers. Finally, unions have typically wanted workers to identify more with each other and with the union, and have been wary of having workers identifying their interests too closely with those of management, although there are many cases in which that has happened. And what I'm going to call an enterprise approach to labor management relations generally you can have both management and union leaders seeking a kind of enterprise level shared interests and identity in order to achieve some common goals. So when I take these two dimensions of lean with the technical pillar only versus lean that's balanced between technical and social, and then these two points of particular tension or active engagement between union approaches, the job control and the enterprise. I get this 2 by 2, and this in some ways is the heart of the chapter, so I'll spend a moment talking about it. In the upper left, you have the unaligned, you have job control unionism, and you have lean with the technical only approach. So usually the lean operations practices are implemented in a top-down engineering kind of way. There's no effort really to engage workers. Unions and workers may oppose lean at some level, actively or passively. This probably is the historical, in a way, pre-lean production foundation of traditional mass production. And it continued to be true in the US in the early years of the diffusion of lean production. I would say the UK, Australia, another country where job control unionism was fairly strong, and so similar dynamics appeared. And you also saw the kind of adversarial labor relations playing out in the same kind of interactions with lean in Fiat in Italy and Hyundai in Korea. And then on the lower right, you have the aligned cell, where you have more of an enterprise approach to union worker management relations, and you have the balanced approach to lean. This is certainly the approach that you find at Toyota plants in Japan, in most Toyota plants around the world, certainly from the research I did some years back. I haven't been visiting those plants as much recently. Other Japanese automakers to a lesser extent, but really following in Toyota's lead in Japan, and then also in transplants. I'm noting here that General Motors and Renault seem to be the companies that most consistently tried to implement this approach at a lot of their plants. So then we have the other diagonal. I'm putting in the upper right where the lean approach is more technical only, but there is this enterprise orientation to the union management relationships. I'm characterizing Ford there has had a very big effort in building a cooperative relationships with the UAW, and has also had the Ford production system, its own effort at lean, but the two have seemed quite disconnected and operating almost in parallel, not necessarily with conflict, but certainly not achieving the potential synergies that might be possible from the fully aligned approach. I would say the other place where this seems to be fairly common is in Germany, where at least for many years, the labor relations dynamics were quite separate from whatever was being considered on the operations side. And then in the lower left, you have a job control unionism and an effort to have the balanced approach to lean. I think this is true at some of the Japanese transplants that are unionized, where there have been conflicts to some degree at the Numi plant. This was the case at the Kami plant in Canada, at some of the Japanese transplants in the UK, and also the Japanese transplants in Australia. And this is probably also the place where you see a non-union path being pursued. So management wants the balanced approach to lean and chooses union avoidance, often perhaps anticipating that they would be confronted with a job control approach to unionism that they don't want to deal with, that they find incompatible with their approach to lean. So can obviously go much deeper into all of these examples, but for now, let me just wrap up the presentation with a few conclusions. I think and this is certainly a theme of the entire book that Tom and Darina edited, the appeal of lean as a production system, as an operation strategy that promises the elimination of waste and therefore better productivity, better quality, remains high. And you find a lot of firms that reach for those benefits, perhaps in a technical only way. Generally, I would say ignorant of, or maybe aware of and resisting Toyota's central intention and goal of balancing the technical and human pillars. So, for anyone who learned primarily about lean from a big focus on Toyota and the history of Toyota in Japan, and then the diffusion of TPS around the world, they might be expecting the kind of balanced lean to be the norm in much of the world. But in fact, I think it's the technical only lean is much more common. And in some cases, that's after trying a more balanced approach and basically giving up or backing away from it. Balanced lean is really not easy at all to achieve. And I would say it's also, even in the settings where it's most, you might say the most favorable conditions exist, such as in Japan, there are regularly challenges that require a lot of work to deal with and to maintain the system. But it at least has the potential to achieve these multiple positive outcomes simultaneously, which is the thing that is out of reach for technical only lean, which I would say will always face a cap on positive outcomes due to its misalignment with all three levels of the industrial relations system. So I will stop there and look forward to the comments of anyone who watches this, and certainly the commentator at the conference. Thank you.